Well, hi, everybody, and welcome to Progressive Field. It is cold. It is a very typical October afternoon, and it's a day where Cleveland fans from Ashtabula to Vermilion and all the way down probably to Ashland are wondering how in the world the Cleveland Guardians are going to get this thing back on track. It was not a good 2 days in New York. Cleveland had chances to win both games, but comes back home down 2 games to none in this best of seven American League Championship Series. I'm Brendan Gulick, Cleveland Guardians on SI. Hope you'll join us throughout the series here for content just like this. And certainly with all the latest news and information on the team, you can check us out over at si.com/MLB/Guardians. We've got you covered over there. All right, down 2 games to none. Not great. Certainly not the hole that the Guardians wanted to dig themselves. The good news is it's certainly not over, and the odds, while they are stacked against them, are not astronomical. I'll get to that in a little bit, but essentially you got about a 1 in 5 shot historically of climbing out of a 2-0 deficit in a best of seven series. And this Guardians team certainly knows they haven't played their best baseball. And frankly, the Yankees look pretty vulnerable. The first 2 games of the series had a lot of moments of just not really clean, crisp, great play that you would normally expect from the best two teams in the American League. And so it still feels like things are pretty up for grabs. And I guess from Cleveland's perspective, that's given them a chance to take a big, deep breath. We had a chance to talk with Stephen Vogt today and with Matthew Boyd. We'll tell you about Boyd in a second, but let's start with Stephen Vogt. In particular, I asked him, hey, look, you can't control the schedule, but after having 2 games that didn't go your way, to now having an off day, would you rather have just played and gotten back at it, or are you trying to find ways to use the off day to somehow mentally wipe the slate clean? Here's what Vogt had to say.
I think in a perfect world you want to keep playing. You want to go, but with the schedule, use the off day, get the guys the day off, some rest, reset, and come in ready to go tomorrow. It's a good thing. We love playing. We love being out there, and so the schedule is what it is. And the first round, being 8 days, 5 games in 8 days is a little different. But for us right now, we just want to get back out there and play.
Well, they're not going to have to wait too much longer because as we stand here live, it's about 5:45 Eastern time, which means we are 23 hours away from first pitch of Game 3. So the team will have one more good night's sleep, hopefully, after traveling home last night from New York. And then they'll be back out there. And, you have to balance that. You're playing with urgency, but you can't really let pressure get to you. You sort of create pressure in your head. That's what we regularly hear from guys in the locker room. You just got to go out and play baseball the way that the game can be played, and hope that things are going to go your way. Control what you can control. That's what this team is going to do. All right. We did learn today that Matthew Boyd is going to be the Game 2 starter, and that's, frankly, I think it's important. It's certainly notable, but right now he's about as trustworthy, in my opinion, as any guy in that clubhouse. I'm glad, as a Cleveland fan, you want to see guys that you feel like have have some experience under their belt, have earned opportunities to pitch in big games. And certainly he's been a big part of this team since he got to Cleveland. Matthew Boyd really excited about the chance to take this ball in Game 3. Had a chance to talk to him today about what it was like to watch Game 1 and Game 2 from the dugout, and if he was able to learn anything about the Yankees there.
Both. You do a little bit of everything. I mean, you're definitely locked in. Learning from what's out there. Obviously, you try to dial in on the left-handers more than anything else because they're the most, obviously similar to you. But, you just watch the game. I grew up, my dad's a coach. He still coaches summer baseball, 18U baseball in the Seattle area. And ever since I was a kid, I kind of always watched the game through a coach's lens, through strategy, through whatnot, so when you're watching the game, I love to put myself in, maybe what the hitter's trying to do, or what look at the guys on deck and whatnot, and just think of it that way. But you're always watching little details, and it's always fun to watch the strategy of the game and watch how things, guys approach it and whatnot.
And listen, the way that you prep for the game probably doesn't change internally in, your game-to-game basis. But suppose when you have a couple of different opportunities to look at those guys and the way they're playing, maybe it helps you pick up little things along the way that perhaps you wouldn't have caught if you weren't watching in person. You never know what you can learn along the way. So good for Matthew Boyd for trying to take the opportunity in game 1 and game 2 to stand in the dugout and soak in playoff baseball at Yankee Stadium, and see if he could learn something that would help him in game 3, because heaven knows the Guardians certainly need him to be at his best. If you're wondering about Matthew Boyd against the New York Yankees throughout his career, he's pitched 6 times, all as a member of the Tigers, 31 and a third innings of work, none of which have come in the playoffs. They're all regular season outings. His record 1-3 with a 5.17 ERA. But again, it's, those outings have come not more recently than 2019. So it's certainly been a while since he's pitched against New York, and hopefully we'll see something special from him on I guess it'll be Thursday night. In terms of guys that have hit him well, Aaron Judge has 11 plate appearances. He's drawn 5 walks, so I guess his average is good at 2 for 6. He's hitting .333, but he's the only one that's had an awful lot of plate appearances against him. Gleyber Torres has kind of struggled. He's had 9 at bats, but he's 1 for 9. And the only other guy that's got a good average is Jose Trevino, who it sounds like may have a chance to catch instead of Wells. Austin Wells is really not swinging a very good bat right now for the Yankees, so it's not stunning to me that Trevino might get a nod in game 3 for the Yanks. Verdugo is 1 for 6 off of Matthew Boyd. Juan Soto does have a home run. He's 1 for 2. The only 2 guys in the lineup for the Yankees to take Matthew Boyd deep in his career are Judge and Soto. So do with that what you will. All right. It's really cool to talk to Matthew Boyd about playoff baseball and frankly baseball in general. The guy he's so genuine and so excited to be a part of this team and know that he's playing a critical role, and you can feel the gratitude because of what he's gone through. He's had a pretty rough go the last couple of years with injuries and being out of baseball and trying to carve his way back, and then finally finds himself in an opportunity now to pitch in a game of this magnitude, even bigger than game 5. Because the Guardians have their backs against the wall, and they're on the doorstep of the World Series. If they can come up with some wins here in the ALCS. This is what Matthew Boyd had to say earlier today about the excitement of pitching in playoff baseball.
I mean, personally for me, I've spent the better parts of 9 seasons, watching the playoffs from home, outside of 1 year at Seattle, right? And it's one of those things where you're like, man, I know my time is going to come to get to do that, and you just don't know what it feels like though when you get out there, and it's just it's invigorating. It feels like opening day all over again, but that doesn't even do it justice. It's just it's crazy how you play 162 games, you work a whole year to get to this point, and it's like you don't want to say it's all for nothing, but it's like the slate is wiped clean, and it's like, here you go, just go compete. And I think that's kind of the coolest part of it. It's just it's kind of electrifying in that sense.
I like that word, electrifying. It's going to be electric at Progressive Field on Thursday night. The crowd, I'm expecting to be, obviously pro Cleveland, but hostile to New York at the same time. The Yankees typically, for whatever reason, when they travel here, their fans tend to travel fairly well. I'm getting the impression just in the vibe around town. I was in New York yesterday, traveled in the airport. There were a lot of people walking around in Guardians gear, and talking to people downtown as I literally walked over from the parking garage into the ballpark here. There's a buzz right now, and people know that, look, maybe the expectations for this team weren't World Series bound from the start of spring training. That's not necessarily a fair thing to say, but they certainly have captured the hearts and the attention of Guardians fans. And look, when you're playing against the Yankees, everybody in Cleveland wants the Yankees to go down. Obviously, Cleveland has played against the Yankees 6 times previously in the postseason. They beat them the first time around in '97, but have lost now 4 of those last 5 series, including 3 in a row. It's the 4th time that these 2 teams have met in the playoffs since 2017. So they've become pretty familiar, obviously, with one another. And frankly, the Guardians or Indians as a franchise have played against New York in playoff baseball more than any other team. So there's obviously the vitriol is certainly strong here. And look, I think Cleveland trusts Matthew Boyd. They need him to go out and dominate. They need him to play well, and give this rotation a little bit of length, because Stephen Vogt has had to be really heavily reliant on the bullpen. And it worked okay against Detroit. And in these first couple of games, look, if maybe you have a couple more timely hits along the way, maybe it's a different conversation. You don't feel quite as strongly about the way starting pitching hasn't gone deep into these two games. But the Guardians, I would say, borderline desperately need a good start from Matthew Boyd tomorrow. They've got to get some length from him and give this bullpen a chance to go Cade Smith, Tim Herron, Hunter Gaddis, Emmanuel Clase, and shut the door on a win. We haven't even seen Clase in this series yet. So, unfortunately for Cleveland, they've been playing from behind too much in the playoffs and certainly in this series. And I think if Matthew Boyd can give them a good start tomorrow, might give them a better chance to play from out front. All right, I want to do a little stock up, stock down. Boy, I don't want to be overly negative. Cleveland's catchers have really struggled offensively. Austin Hedges and Bo Naylor are 0 for 23 in the playoffs with 9 strikeouts, and neither of them have recorded a base hit since September 25th. A Cleveland catcher has not had a multi-hit game since September 9th. We're standing here on October 16th. And when you're talking about being at crunch time, man, you can't have what feels like an automatic out in the lineup. And so I actually asked Stephen Vogt today about the plate approaches from Bo and Austin. You can't control the outcome, but does Stephen Vogt at least feel good about the way those guys are approaching their at-bats, the quality of at-bat, even if they're not productive in terms of getting base hits? Here's what he had to say.
Yeah, I think, both of them work the count. Both of them are ready, they're prepared and they're ready to go. They just haven't had any success or results yet. And I think I love the word yet, because at any moment, I think either one of them could break out and have a big game for us because they're prepared and they're ready to go.
To follow up on that, how much has David Fry's, not being able to go into the field and getting on the plate and catch, really since the second half of the season, impacted your ability to move things around and get matchups that you like?
Yeah, I think, the inability for David to play in the field every day has definitely, had an impact on us. And whether that be catching, first base, third base, outfield, he's a incredible utility player, and it's hindered us to be able to get his bat in the lineup a little more often than we'd like to. But to David's credit, he's doing everything he can to impact us, and we find ways to get him in there. We get creative, but it definitely has been a little bit of a hindrance for the versatility that we had the first half of the year.
I wanted to leave that question in at the end there too about David Fry, because a lot of people have been asking, gee, Fry was catching beginning of the year. Is he working through that injury? Is there any chance that maybe you see him behind the plate? And ultimately, it sounds like the answer is just a flat out no. The elbow injury for Fry is not something that he's going to be able to salvage here this season, and that's a challenge. And Stephen Vogt has to find the right way to say that while also still having confidence publicly in Bo and in Austin. Defensively, 4 wild pitches in game 1. Maybe a couple of those were on Cantillo. Maybe a couple of those could have been better chested up from Bo Naylor. Whatever the case was, that was a pretty ugly moment, unfortunately, for Cleveland. And look, Bo had such a good offensive minor league career that I think everybody expected he was going to be at least a productive major league hitter, and it just hasn't happened yet. And so that's one of the huge questions, frankly, in the offseason that this team needs to address is what is the future at catcher? Is it Bo Naylor? And if not, need to make a move quick, because perhaps there might have been a little surprise in how ready this team is to win now. Maybe not. But if you have a hole at catcher the way that the Guardians have had a hole at catcher in the critical juncture of this season, that's going to be a major problem here going into next year. So let's not talk about next year, but in the meantime, you got to find a way to work through that part of the lineup. I liked the pinch hit opportunity for David Fry yesterday. I thought it was the right decision. I liked the timing of it. You get the bases loaded against Cole. You got to find a way to scratch something across. Garrett Cole threw a really good pitch, and David Fry popped out. I mean, what are you going to do? Sometimes that just happens. Um, Cole's stuff last night was a little erratic, but I thought it was pretty nasty. He definitely didn't pound the zone the way we've seen in the past, but he had such great movement. I mean, a 98-mile-an-hour sinker in on your hands, like, good luck. So, in a lot of ways, Cole was a really tough pitcher last night. I don't know that he was vintage Garrett Cole, but he was certainly a tough customer. And the Guardians still had opportunities to try to get to him. They've got to get better productivity from the catcher spot offensively. So stock down right now, Austin Hedges, Bo Naylor. Stock up, Brian Rokio. If you'd have told me in July that this stadium was going to be chanting Rokio in the American League Division Series for the way he was hitting, I don't think I would have believed you, and most people probably wouldn't have. Pretty wild the way that Brian Rokio has all of a sudden looked like a really, really good offensive player. Is it just a little flash in the pan? I don't know. I hope not. I know a lot of people hope not. Um, Obviously, he's a finalist for a Gold Glove this year in the American League, and so you tend to trust what he does defensively. Certainly, last night's embarrassing error is a frustrating one. Although I would argue probably wouldn't have mattered so much because I think that run would have scored anyways, another batter later. But I digress. Rocchio has largely been good defensively. He's also largely been bad offensively until the playoffs. Brian Rocchio looks outstanding. He's seeing the ball really well, and he is exhibiting a terrific eye at the plate here in the postseason. So much in the same way you're asking yourself the question about what the future of catcher looks like, I think it's fair right now to say, has Rocchio basically played himself into a more solidified role as the shortstop? It's very possible that that could be the case. He certainly has played well, and this team needs Brian Rocchio to keep swinging a hot bat. I don't know if Stephen Kwan's stock can get higher than it is, but if it could, it is, I guess. I mean, he's been fantastic in the playoffs, hitting safely in 12 consecutive games, which no Cleveland Indian or Guardian has ever done in their career. So a franchise record for Stephen Kwan in that regard. So Kwan and Rocchio stock up. Naylor and Hedges right now stock down. All right, guards ball has been thrown around quite a bit in this 2024 playoffs, and those that have followed the season closely probably have a good idea. But in case you're new to the Guardians this year or you haven't paid as much attention, essentially guards ball is being a balanced team. It's not being too reliant on one thing or another. It's the way they play. It's the way they think and treat the game. It's the extra hustle, taking the extra base, being able to bunt and move runners over. Some of it's small ball, but it's not just small ball. It's thinking the game as you're playing it and doing it in an aggressive way that puts a lot of pressure on your opponent. And there's lots of different ways to do that. And the reality is the Guardians have won games by doing that kind of thing all year long. They really haven't played very good guards ball in this first couple of games of the series. And Stephen Vogt was asked today, hey, do you think maybe there's something to playing that way in front of a home crowd versus playing on the road?
I think, it could be the crowd gets into it. I don't know. I just think that, when we get stuff going and we make things happen, that's when we click. And we did that last night. We just weren't able to get that big hit. We had pressure on them all night. Seemed like every inning we had 1-2 guys on, and if not 3, and just weren't able to get that big, base hit double with runners in scoring position. And our guys have been great in those situations, for the majority of the year. And when you have one game where it stands out, it's not going to get us down.
There are some numbers that I think maybe could give a little more credence to what guards ball really looks like. So we'll share those with you. First and foremost, playing good defense, and Cleveland hasn't played great defense in this series so far. I mentioned the wild pitches. Obviously, Rocchio dropped the pop-up on the infield yesterday. And then even beyond that, I mean, Will Brennan in right field, trying to make the sliding catch on a ball that he probably should have had and ultimately didn't. There was another play where a ball caromed off the wall. He tried to barehand it. It just, I don't know if he, you know, mind's moving faster than your body, whatever it might be, but we tried to stab it with his bare hand. The ball spun out of his hand, and that legitimately immediately led to a run. Just wasn't a clean play. And, I think there's an element of everybody needs to take a deep breath and get back to playing, the rock solid game that you're used to seeing defensively. And we've seen that in the playoffs, right? Stephen Kwan's catch diving in left field against the Tigers. John Kenzie Noel in right field in the same game, throwing a guy out, trying to turn it into a double from right field. Jose Ramirez has played a really good third base in this series so far. He's had a couple of really hard hit, short hop balls that he's had to charge and glove on the run, and he stabbed them perfectly and made good throws across. So, I think in general there have been some good moments. It just hasn't been quite as solid and clean and consistent as we're used to seeing. And I think if Cleveland's going to win the series, man, they've got to play a little bit sharper on defense. Cleveland has also been really good, especially when they score first. 59-16 in the regular season and 2-0 in the postseason when they score the first run of the game. When they give up the first run of the game, they're 33-53 in the regular season, 1-4 in the playoffs. So a huge difference there. It's not that they can't come from behind and win, and it's not that they never blow a lead, but there are some pretty big discrepancies. Scoring first has been really important for Cleveland. And by the way, when they concede the first run, 1-4 is still good enough for the fourth best winning percentage in the playoffs and during the regular season because the bullpen had done its job to back that up. And then I think the other thing that stands out to me is on the base paths. This is a team that had 148 stolen bases during the regular season, which was fifth in Major League Baseball. They've got one so far through these first couple of games. They haven't really had a lot of extra base hits. And so you would think, okay, well, if you're not hitting doubles and triples and home runs consistently, but you are having traffic on the bases, is there opportunity to go out and try to steal bags? And so far, they haven't really done a lot of that, with the exception of Ramirez stealing second last night. So I'm interested to see if they can put themselves in position to be the team that's forcing the action, play at the tempo and the pace that they want to play at, and force New York to be on its heels a little bit. I'd like to see them try to get to it on the base paths a little bit. All right, we'll wrap with this. What's at stake? Just a couple of interesting notes, I think, on exactly what Cleveland is facing here. Teams that take a 2-0 series lead in a best-of-7 postseason series win that series 76 out of 91 times. It's 83.5%. So 15 times out of 91 in a best-of-7, a team has come back from an 0-2 deficit, including last year when the Arizona Diamondbacks got throttled in game 2 against the Dodgers 10-0. And they won 4 of the next 5, and they won the NLCS, and obviously went to the World Series to represent the National League last year. So you don't have to look back that far to see a team that has turned it around after a bad start. But if you get off to a 2-0 lead, that tends to be pretty favorable. And by the way, 32 of 37 in the LCS for teams that start with a 2-0 lead. So the Guardians have a little bit of work cut out for them statistically in that way. And then just a couple of things on Clark Schmidt, in case you're wondering what the Guardians might have in front of them tomorrow when Clark Schmidt's on the mound. Not a ton of career all-time at-bats, but there are a couple of Guardians who have hit Clark Schmidt fairly well. Andres Jimenez, Stephen Kwan, and Jose all have done reasonably well. Let's see, Ramirez is 3 for 8 with a couple RBIs. Stephen Kwan 4 for 8. Andres Jimenez is 5 for 9 against Clark Schmidt with a double and an RBI. Those are the 3 top Guardians hitters against Schmidt. This will be Clark Schmidt's 5th appearance against Cleveland in his career. 1-0 with a 3.52 ERA, 18 strikeouts, 10 walks over 15 1/3 innings. Of his previous 4 outings against Cleveland, 2 have actually come in the playoffs in relief, where he's thrown an inning and a third, and in one instance did take a loss. So some looks, but not a ton for Cleveland against Clark Schmidt, but obviously a couple guys that have fared fairly well against him. The only other news out of the ballpark today, we now know who's going to throw the ceremonial first pitches, and that's always fun for the crowd. Jason Kipnis, Game 3. Travis Hafner will throw out the first pitch in Game 4, and if necessary, Game 5. Ryan Merritt is coming back to Cleveland to throw out the ceremonial first pitch. That sounds like good vibes only. I like that idea. Ryan Merritt coming back to Cleveland after, of course, what he did back in 2016. So should be a ton of fun. 5:08 first pitch tomorrow. The gates open a couple hours beforehand. The Guardians would love to have you on site early and make New York feel like they are in a hostile environment here in Cleveland, because Cleveland has not fared well against New York all time. In fact, in the last 34 meetings between the two teams, New York is now 24-10, and that goes back to the 2020 season. And the Guardians have lost 7 consecutive series to the Yankees and 9 of their last 10. So Cleveland's going to try to do what it can to flip this thing around and get themselves right back in the heart of the ALCS pennant race. All right, lots of coverage continuing tomorrow here from Progressive Field on Cleveland Guardians on SI. Of course, it's si.com/MLB/Guardians. You can certainly find us here on this YouTube channel and our Twitter accounts as well. I'm Brendan Gulick. You can follow me on Twitter. We'll have lots of behind-the-scenes stuff for you along the way. Game 3 coming up tomorrow, 5:08 first pitch, Cleveland and New York in the ALCS.